All right, welcome to another episode of NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode, we are talking about the Washington Commanders, and I am joined by Edward Ford. He is the morning news producer at Fox 61 in Hartford, Connecticut. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Hey, any day I can talk about football is a great day, especially when I get to learn about teams that I don't really know a lot about. And when we talk about Washington, with the name change and everything, we've kind of talked about this offline a little bit. There's a lot of mystery kind of going in with this team and everything, and I definitely want to get into it. First of all, talk about your background with the team, and then also then covering them.
So for me, obviously working up here at Fox 61, there's a lot of things and a lot of scoops that I get about the team. Like I knew when the team name was coming. I saw a lot about what the team name possibly was going to be. I even put out on Twitter that I knew it, and people were like, "Man, just say it, just say it." And with journalistic style, you can't really put that out there until the actual day. But you always the job of a journalist is to tease you about it. Like I'm gonna be honest, that's the fun thing about it. You know something that somebody doesn't know, right? Like a lot of people did not have faith in a lot of things Ron Rivera was doing. There was a lot of releases that happened this year. And covering sports and news on the same side, when I saw a lot of the releases, I didn't get mad because you can't. There's only but so much money you can pay around, right? It's just like a job. You can only pay somebody but so much, and then there's a ceiling. And a lot of people saw, oh, Matt Ioannidis left, and Tim Settle left, and oh my gosh, this team is going backwards again. And I'm like, well, no, like there's a draft coming up, okay, where we're gonna have like 6 or 7 picks, okay, and you got to understand, like a lot of people didn't like the Carson Wentz signing. I had no problem with it. Again, like you said, we can get into that in a little bit, but I didn't have no problem with it. I think the problem with the Commanders now, but then Washington football team, is that they really didn't have a quarterback to throw the ball to Terry McLaurin or anybody. So it's like when you go through so many quarterbacks, it's like, okay, we just need a quarterback. So when I saw that we signed Carson Wentz, and I get it, he's due $28 million, but we know that quarterbacks are not cheap. Okay, everybody wanted Russell Wilson, but then they wasn't complaining about his money at that point. I think Russell was going to cost us 24, 25. What's $3 million? $3 million is like $3 in our pockets. Mm-hmm. So I feel like you can't complain about the money when you finally get a quarterback, as everybody said, that can sling the ball. We understand Carson Wentz made stupid mistakes sometimes, okay, but the dude threw 7 picks last year, so it could have been too many mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, so let's kind of get into him. When you look at this signing, I mean, is it a low risk, signing? I mean, he could, there's a lot of different options. I mean, he could either do really well, really bad, or average. I mean, when you look at those, I mean, and for this signing, is it a low risk signing for the Commanders?
Well, I'm gonna tell you why I think it's a low risk signing. If you look at where Dak Prescott's contract is, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take a look at even where Ezekiel Elliott's contract is, I think Ezekiel's owed like $19 million. And at some point, I think it's not this year, but the year after this is when Dak Prescott's money kicks in. So if they don't trade and they keep Ezekiel Elliott and let's say they franchise tag him or sign him to a very short-term deal, you're paying those two players between $50 and $60 million. Well, if Dak is 40, Aaron Rodgers, I think, is in the mid-30s right now. Like, you're still paying Wentz on a $28 million deal. I think, in a sense, that's low risk. That's a low risk because you're not having to really pay up too much. And in the middle of all this, if Carson Wentz really wants to be here and does well, they can restructure his deal where all of that money's not paid up front, but it's paid on the back end. Or they can say, if you throw 30 touchdowns, you get an incentive at the end of the year. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's different ways to throw things in there than saying, oh, my gosh, we gave up $28 million for Carson Wentz. There's a reason why the Eagles – we know why the Eagles gave up on him because he got hurt. He got hurt. When he tore his ACL at that point during that year, and might not tell you guys, as Eagles fans, he won you guys 70% of those wins you had going into the playoffs. I get that, the backup quarterback, and I can't remember his name, took him to the Super Bowl, won those games. But Carson Wentz did everything that you guys needed to clinch that playoff berth that year. If that's the Carson Wentz that Washington gets this year, watch out because they have like the top 5 easiest schedule in the league right now.
And if he doesn't do well, if he flames out, I mean, this has to be his last chance, right?
Oh, it has to be. I mean, there's no other team. If he flames out, I'll go on the record and say I was wrong for saying he was a low risk at $28 million, because if you didn't trade for him and you took the $28 million, you could have used it elsewhere, right? So I'll be the first to say on Twitter I was wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be that wrong, because Carson Wentz has proved several times in his career, that he can throw more than 20, 25 touchdowns and throw less than 10 picks. And I think that with the weapons of Terry McLaurin now being here for 4 more years, and people forget that he still has to play his rookie deal plus the 3 years on his new deal. So Carson, if he does good, will have Terry. I'm hearing out of camp, that Jahan Dotson is a very great pick for Carson Wentz. If that pans out to be well, if Curtis Samuel stays healthy, that's their top 3 receivers. And then think about Dewami Brown. Dewami Brown was another, I think, 3rd-round pick from North Carolina that was also hurt a bit during last year, but when he did play, showed you a lot of potential. And in camp, again, Carson Wentz is getting him the ball, and I'm hearing that Dewami Brown and Jahan Dotson are his 2 favorite receivers so far in camp. And with Terry coming back and, Curtis out there, I'm telling you, this wide receiver core could be very dangerous and be a team that nobody talks about a lot right now as much, but can sneak up on you.
When I looked at, I'm a Bears fan. We talked about this a little bit offline. And when I looked at Jahan Dotson, I was hoping the Bears would not pick him because it seems to be a Darnell Mooney clone. Do you see, I mean, as far as size and everything, do you see him, maybe having that type of season that Darnell Mooney had with the Bears, last year?
I do. It was funny. They asked for predictions on touchdowns and stuff for Terry McLaurin after he signed his contract. I said, well, here's my prediction for him and Jahan, though. If Jahan Dotson is what he needs to be, he's going to open up the field for Terry McLaurin. That's just that simple. Especially if Curtis Samuel can stay healthy, I'll say for even 3/4 of the season. That's going to open up the field for him. Because now that, again, I'm going to go back to it. Now that we got Carson Wentz, and somebody who could throw the ball, who could sling that ball 70, 80 yards down the field, Terry McLaurin is a deep threat again. He has a quarterback. I do think Jahan Dotson can be that receiver that you guys have in Chicago, because with Terry taking that other top off the field, now it opens it up. And I looked at a lot of tape for Jahan. He knows how to run his routes. He's going to run across the field. He is not afraid to take a hit. He is not afraid to take that pass. And let's just say, as well as I know, Carson Wentz is going to get you the ball. He's going to throw the ball to you. He's going to take that chance. And I kind of also see, though, a little bit, I'm not going to say a lot right now, but I see a little bit of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. The size is not a lot, for both of them. But, they know how to get open. They know how, because one thing about Terry when he first got here that was talked about was he knows how to run his routes. He's a hard worker. He's out there in the community. He's always hard at work in practice. He stays after practice. He's always practicing with big-name players, from the NFL from the past and now. And Jahan Dotson has been hard at work, last man on that field at camp, has always been making great catches. I mean, one-handed catches at that. I mean, yes, it's only training camp or, mini camp or whatever excitement and stuff, or rookie camp excitement. But that's the same thing we had with Terry. And I feel like, I listened to one of his tapes with she calls the games now, actually, with Washington. I can't remember her name, but he was telling her about his background and his family and where he comes from. And it's the same thing of Terry McLaurin, where he comes from and his background and his family and what they didn't have back then. And it's like, to have 2 of these guys on a team, again, culture change. And I think that's what Ron Rivera saw with Jahan is not only did he do very well, and let's not forget, he played at Penn State. Penn State is not some nonchalant school. I mean, Penn State is a school that brings up a lot of great players, maybe unknown players. Nobody knew about Jahan Dotson because everybody wanted the big name players. And I think what a lot of people tend to do is if Washington doesn't get the big name players, they're not going to be anything, right? But then again, you look at J.D. McKissick, when we signed him, we were like, why are you signing him? He was the best non-running back wide receiver on the team outside of Antonio Gibson. So I think people just got to realize that I think Ron Rivera, I know he knows what he's doing. He's gotten a lot of low risk contracts. Minus Carson Wentz, of course, which I still call a low risk. And I say that because low risk, low money. Logan Thomas, I think it is. Yeah, tight end. Low risk. He tore his ACL, but he was a low risk signing. didn't cost as much.
Well, and you talk a little bit about, Curtis Samuel and health wise, is he going to be ready for the season or is he going to be out a little bit?
So from what I heard, I know a lot of people got scared when he was taken out or didn't practice one of those days or something like that because he was injured. Let's be honest. We can walk outside of our apartments or house today, turn an ankle, can't go to work for a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened to him. It wasn't serious. It wasn't the growing or anything because the following day or two later, he was back out there running full speed, catching passes. This is what we call training camp. Things are going to happen. Players are going to get a little tweak here and there. Curtis Samuels was practicing. He will be out there at the minimum that I could say for preseason. I honestly don't think that they're going to take too much of a chance on him in the preseason because they want him ready for the regular season because they know about what happened last year. So don't be shocked if Curtis Samuels gets one, maybe two drives, and then that's it in the first preseason game. He may get a drive or two in the second preseason game. And then I think we only have 3 games this year, if I'm not mistaken now, because of the extra games. So don't be shocked if he doesn't play at all in the third game or any starters. Because that's usually how Washington and other teams do it. They don't play too much in the third game.
Well, yeah, especially, with people with injury history, you want to make sure that, yes, they're ready. And, speaking of that as well, when you look at the running backs, what are you expecting from Antonio Gibson in McKissick and some of the roles? Is Gibson able to stay healthy for the whole year, do you think?
Here's the thing. I think that Antonio Gibson can stay healthy because they got help for him now. I think it was the 3rd or 4th round, if I'm not mistaken. They drafted Brian Robinson. I think he was 3rd round, actually. And people was like, oh, my gosh, that's too high of a pick. I'm like, no, it's not. Here's what you don't understand. Any player outside the 1st or 2nd round is really another what we've just been speaking about, low-risk, high-reward players. They don't get paid much, right? They get like $1 million, maybe $2 million, because I know Terry's getting like $2.3 million this year on his last year for his contract, and then that's when the big money kicks in. I think Brian Robinson is a big running back. I think he's like 6'4", 6'5", or something like that, but like 230 or 240 pounds. So he's a big body running back. I think they was even comparing him to Marshawn Lynch in his early days. And some people were even saying, I'm hearing that, he is a younger Adrian Peterson. And I'm like, if you even get 5% out of Brian Robinson of Adrian Peterson and 95 of Marshawn Lynch, Washington may have found their running back. So, and I've been telling people, don't be shocked if this shifts Antonio Gibson back to his role that he played back in college to wide receiver, okay? He could be a wide receiver 3, or he could be a wide receiver 4 in a bunch set. You could have one receiver on the right, Antonio Gibson in the bunch set on the left, and you just don't know how he's going to be used at that point. Or you could have him in the bunch set, with the receiver on the right, and then you could send your receivers motion, bring Antonio Gibson to the backfield with Brian Robinson, and now he plays that J.D. McKissick role when J.D. McKissick is not on the field. There's a lot of switching up Washington can do this year with a lot of these players they got, and that's why I'm telling people it's not because I'm a Commanders fan. It's because I'm seeing a lot of potential from this team with a legit quarterback. And if they use all these running backs in those different roles, okay, because let's not forget, J.D. McKissick was about to leave and go to Buffalo and came right on back to Washington. He was the second player to do that this year. He was the second player to do that this year in free agency. And I was shocked. And I was like, we probably lost JD. But then I was like, wait, we got him back? And then we drafted a running back and we still got Antonio Gibson? They're trying to get all the weapons here. They're trying to build this team, change the culture, get the weapons.
So that's, a good thing team-wise, especially in the NFL now, to have, that stable of running backs, I mean, with injuries and everything. But, from a fantasy football perspective, it's tough to kind of know. I mean, do you see kind of, Antonio Gibson being relevant, in fantasy football as that bell cow back ever? Or, I mean, is it just going to be kind of in all these different roles where they are, you said, kind of trying to use everyone?
Here's my thing. I think at some point, and this is just my opinion, and not just covering sports or anything like that, I really think that they're trying to work his way back to being a receiver, more than 50%. And I say that because if they drafted Brian Robinson and they see so much potential in him, yes, Antonio Gibson can still have that role 55 60% of the time this year, maybe 55-45. But at some point, I think that Brian Robinson fits himself into the full-time running back role because every team has that full-time, hard-nosed, 100% running back. And then if you're not being used or if you are in the field and you're not being used, you're there for third down protection. I think Brian Robinson also was drafted not just to be a running back, but for his protection role. He was a great protection person with Alabama. And I think that's where they're going to use him a lot more too, because no offense to Antonio Gibson, but he wasn't that good at protecting when it needs to be for the quarterback. So that's why I see them kind of shifting him back to his wide receiver running back role. Brian Robinson taking that running back role and J.D. McKissick being that out of the backfield, just like Antonio Gibson kind of is going to be / was last year.
Well, my guy Nick Bodkins from the Bodkins Show had a question here or comment. He said we talked about culture change, but the thoughts here are getting rid of the owner and the new QB. I mean, what are you kind of hearing about that, and what are your maybe thoughts? I mean, they have to eventually get rid of Daniel Snyder, don't they?
Oh yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, okay, so everybody got excited when they heard that owners were not happy with them anymore, especially after the report of him actually not paying. I think it's 40% or something like that, or 30 or 40% is supposed to go to the league, no matter how much you fill the stadium. Apparently there was reports he was keeping that money or not giving the full amount. Let me say that probably wasn't not giving the full amount, but was keeping some of that money. And then there was reports that a lot of owners were like, yeah, this is the last straw. He's gone. And the thing for me is I got to see it happen before you feel like it's true. But I think this is the last straw. I think that like when you start getting lawmakers involved into your team and or your ownership of a team, you're in a lot of deep trouble. And I think that what's happening is they're waiting for a lot of these straws to kind of fall into place to then X him out. I think Daniel Snyder is out. And to answer the question about the new quarterback, if he's talking about Sam Howell being drafted, he's going to be on the bench for at least a year or two because there was reports that Ron Rivera said actually publicly that he actually told Carson Wentz he was drafting a quarterback. He told Carson Wentz off the bat. Maybe that's because in Indianapolis or elsewhere, like in Philly, they didn't tell him and they just drafted a quarterback. And people was like, well, you should still just come into camp and be the guy and just play and, coach the person up. But then again, I thought, and I'm like, well, when a team goes behind your back and also drafts a quarterback and you just got this big contract, it's kind of telling you that you're not the guy anymore. Or at some point, we're going to get rid of you. So we're all human. Things happen. But I think with the new quarterback, number one, I do love Sam Howell. I thought that's who they were going to take, actually, honestly, if they had to take a quarterback. Like if they just didn't sign anybody and they stuck at that pick they had, I was like, okay, at this point, Washington is probably going to take Sam Howell. It's probably going to be a down year because we will have to start him and go from there. But then they traded for Carson Wentz, took Jahan Dotson, but still got Sam Howell in the very late round, which was a very low risk. I mean, the dude is only making $500,000 in year one. Like that's so low that if Carson Wentz, as we said, is fires out in his first year and they get rid of him and they throw Sam Howell in the second year, right? You're still not paying Sam Howell anything. And if he winds up being your franchise guy, like he comes in and balls out, you're not paying that dude anything for the first 5 years at the minimum.
See, yeah, like when I look at the draft and as a Bears fan, I saw North Carolina quarterback. I said, stay away. And it's interesting you bring it. It is a low risk because, I mean, like my Bears other North Carolina quarterback, there was a lot of risk, and obviously the general manager.
Oh, Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, they traded up for him, and there was so much pressure on him. Right now, there isn't a lot of pressure on Sam Howell to be the guy. You said maybe a year, and so what do you like most about him? Just potential.
Well, one thing I like about him is he takes me back to the years of when I'm pretty sure you too, like when we first watched football and your quarterbacks were not known to do all the scrambling out of the pocket. They were just standing in the pocket. They knew how to take a hit. When I watch his tape and watch actually a few of his games too, that guy knows how to take a hit, but he also can stand in the pocket and deliver the ball is what I saw. Like he has a cannon on him and he could deliver the ball. And I think the problem with Sam Howell is when he lost the talent around him in North Carolina, especially like when DeWami Brown got drafted by Washington, he was Sam Howell's number one receiver.
Oh, yeah, that's an
He was
interesting.
Sam Howell's number one guy. And when he lost DeWami Brown, I think he even lost like a running back or another receiver.
2 running backs. I think Michael Carter and
yeah.
And
So he
Williams.
lost 3 talented players. Still threw for a lot of touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So the point I'm making is when you put Sam Howell around a lot of talent, I think he could be very successful. Let me say this. I think Sam Howell, and I hate to say this way, is a poor man's Dak Prescott.
Okay.
Dak Prescott was a very late round pick. Not very late, probably like middle of the pack, like 3rd or 4th round or something like that. And he took over for Tony Romo. Okay, same scenario can happen here. Took over for Tony Romo. Dak Prescott came in, low risk, not getting paid a lot, had a lot of talent around him, took off. Sam Howell could do the same thing if the talent stays here and if they continue to put it around him.
Is there any difference though between him and Baker Mayfield? It just seems like, looking draft wise and everything, it almost seemed, as an outsider that he's Baker Mayfield 2.0. I mean, how much different is he from Baker?
Well, I think it goes back to what you just spoke about Mitchell Trubisky. Mm-hmm. Baker Mayfield was also a 1st round pick. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think when you're an early round pick, the pressure's on you to be great, like you said, right away. Like there cannot be any mistakes because we all know as fans, even as a reporter, but as a fan, you are on these players. You are expecting, if not year 1, year 2 has to be better, right? It's got to be good. At times we forget what's put around these players, but we're like, you still got to be good. You got to be great. You were drafted in the 1st round. You were this good. Your name is a big name player. Sam Howell was a late round pick. Again, I think now he's got that chip on his shoulder where he doesn't have to, like we said, come in and be successful right away. And I think he can hold that clipboard in the headset and learn. And I think that when you're forced to have to do like Aaron Rodgers did in his career, okay, when you are forced to have to do like even Kirk Cousins behind RG3 at that time and learn to hold a clipboard, I think those type of players succeed more because they are not forced to be so great right away, but they also have to earn it. And I think that's the thing. Sam Howell is having to earn it. I'm sorry, for me, Baker Mayfield, my problem with him has always been when he came into the league, the first thing he did was show off the money he had. Mm-hmm. He didn't really concentrate on, let me go into the training room. Let me go into the film room. Let me look at this, look at that. I get it. You're a 1st round pick. You got millions of dollars now. But you also have to still go into the training room, go into the film room and learn, become this leader. And I think Baker Mayfield is a leader now, but I think it happened a little too late. And now he's like on the fringe of where am I going to be playing at next year.
And my guy Nick Bodkins also had another question here, and we'll kind of get into it now too, and then get into some of the specifics on the defense as well. But what are your thoughts on the overall win-loss record for the Commanders this year?
Well, once they got a quarterback, that was my thing. Once they got a quarterback to throw somebody the ball, and look, Taylor Heineke was a great success story. It was fun to watch him. Up and down year, games he should have lost, he won. Games he lost, that he should have won, took an L for. Could have been a playoff team last year too if you won 2 more games, but it is what it is. I think this year is the over for me of 8.5 wins. I was actually going with 10, and I think that's realistic because when I went through the schedule, I think we played Green Bay again, but that's in Washington. And I think with the name change that there's going to be a little bit more fans coming. I think with Carson Wentz and having a legit quarterback, I think over the time of the season, if Carson Wentz shows that he could be that quarterback that can throw 3 or 4 touchdowns a game and still have the running back do their thing, I think this team has a lot of potential to win 10 games. I've been saying on Twitter, don't be shocked if they win 11. If there's that one game they should absolutely lose, and I mean absolutely lose, that they win. If you go back 2 years, nobody in their mind even thought that Washington was going to beat Pittsburgh on that Thursday night. And they solidified and did. Okay? They did. With Alex Smith, a 3rd quarterback on that team. So, again, I said it earlier, I think when we were offline, they have the top 5 or top 3 easiest schedule this year. That's why I said when Carson Wentz had an easy schedule in year 2, he took off and won them like 11 or 12 games before getting hurt. So I think there's a potential for 10. If he gets us 11, I'll take it. But I think 10 is just a realistic number to stick with when we've been around 7 wins every year. So I think giving us 3 more wins is just more realistic, especially with Dallas actually getting a little bit worse, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Amari Cooper got traded.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Gallup is coming back from an ACL tear, so you don't know how good he's going to be. And now you're forcing CeeDee Lamb to be your number 1. And I feel like what's going to happen with CeeDee Lamb is what happened with Terry McLaurin. You only got one number 1. Everybody's going to double him and take him away.
Well, and we've got some comments here. Not a lot of people outside of Commanders, believing in Carson Wentz. And when you look at it, and I'd have to kind of go back. I mean, he had some issues in with the Eagles, obviously, but a lot of that, head coach, and I don't know quite what happened. And he actually played pretty well last year. I think it seemed like the ownership had already moved on from him. So, Wentz, if you look at him, I mean, are you worried that maybe in big moments that he's not going to perform?
I think, look, like I said at the beginning, I think that's all quarterbacks can have gone through that in their career. I'm the type of person that's like you felt. For a guy that threw 27 touchdowns and 7 picks last year, for the Colts to just give up on him, I just think that there was a disconnect from the owners and him and somebody within that coaching staff. Because any team that has a quarterback that throws those type of numbers and has the mistakes that he had will still keep that quarterback, because no quarterback is perfect. Aaron Rodgers has mistakes. Matt Ryan has mistakes. Tom Brady had a mistake. I mean, heck, he lost to Washington. Shouldn't have lost, but he threw 2 picks before the half. And I bring that up because all quarterbacks make mistakes, and I get it. People are saying we still don't have a quarterback. Well, you don't know that until you see Carson Wentz play, or until we give Sam Howell a chance. People are going to say that until Washington formally has a quarterback. And I get it. Your opinion, people's opinion is, until they see a quarterback come in here, throw 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, win 10 or 11 games, take them to the playoffs, not once but twice. Okay, I said this before to my dad. I got to see Washington go to the playoffs twice before if I move back home and get season tickets. You got to show me continued success and that we're going to fill the stadium with home fans before I buy season tickets. I get it. But I think that people harp so much on they don't have a quarterback that's all they worry about, and they're not trying to be positive about things. So I think right now, for me, I think Carson Wentz has to understand that he has to be better in those situations. You cannot throw sidearm picks like you're used to doing all over the place. He's still going to do it. He's throwing sidearm passes in practice. Okay, you can't take away something from somebody that was successful in the past. But I think what he has to understand is, if you don't see anybody open, or you want to take that chance, but you're like, I don't know, throw the ball away and live for another down or live for another drive. It's not worth getting a pick 6 or throwing the ball. He's a guy that, he's going to drive you down the field if he needs to have a game-winning drive. He's going to do that. He's going to put Washington in much more positions to win games with a field goal or a touchdown at the end. He just has to make sure that he doesn't put himself in that situation where he has to do that. If people understand what I'm saying. So.
Well, he had some great throws in the rain, I believe, against the 49ers in just that mess of a game, so like he's able to do it. He's got that arm strength. And, so when we're talking about quarterbacks, and how would you rank the NFC East division quarterbacks then?
So right now, obviously, as much as I had to say it, I mean, the only quarterback that's good in that division is Dak Prescott. And then after that, I think, honestly, if I'm being honest, I think it's a toss-up between Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz, because everybody wants to be so happy about what Jalen Hurts did last year, but the man didn't even throw 20 touchdowns. Like, he had a balanced season, if you want to call it that, or okay season. Yeah, he did well against Washington. Yeah, he did well against other teams, but then when he got to the playoffs, it just looked like this is the same old Jalen Hurts again. So again, if we're going to be fair, right now, Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts are teetering right now at tied at number 2. Look, Daniel Jones is not the guy for the Giants. I'm sorry, we figured that out 2 years, almost a year ago. He is not the guy. I told them that they reached for him. They shouldn't have reached for him. I'm sorry, I just don't think Daniel Jones is the guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just one of my buddies on Twitter talking about whether which quarterback was better, Daniel Jones or Justin Fields, and he for some reason thinks Daniel Jones is. So I had to shut down the
But Daniel
conversation there.
Jones had to play. Daniel Jones had to play a full season, and he missed like the last 5 games or something like that.
Yeah.
And people are still complaining about this as Giants fan, but you even lost a Thursday night game to Taylor Heineke in Washington. So let's pump the brakes on Daniel Jones. If he was that good, he's got some weapons around him. Why has he not been successful? And everybody wants to blame head coach. No, y'all was happy when you took your guy from New England. That wasn't a success story. And now you're like, oh, we got a guy from Buffalo. Well, pump the brakes. I still need to see Daniel Jones perform. Okay, because I still think now that Carson Wentz is on Washington with weapons there, and you got Jalen Hurts and with Philly with weapons there. Okay, they just got AJ Brown, and then you got Dallas. Yes, they have CD, but you also got have all these other things going around for Dallas with question marks. Look, I'm sorry. I really and truly think, and I see the comment somebody saying Eagles are going to be problems for the division this year. Yes, people got to stay healthy. AJ Brown has had injury problems though in his career. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to be on the field for that to happen. And look, the rookie that they drafted in Philly too, he's got to be better. If I'm being honest, the shock out of this division could be the Washington Commanders and the Eagles this year. Teetering for that division lead, because I think both teams have a lot of weapons. And it's going to be fun to watch the Eagles and Washington battle it out. Because, again, both quarterbacks are like, okay, are you even that good? Year one wasn't good for Jalen Hurts, but you had an okay year last year. But if Carson Wentz comes in and he does great this year, then now you got a problem with Washington in there. So it's like we got a lot of things. I think the Giants are obviously going to finish last. I think Eagles and Washington's going to battle it out for second place. I wouldn't be shocked if one of those teams, though, winds up, knocking the Cowboys out of first place, because they had a good year last year, but then they pooped the bed against the 49ers.
And we're talking about Eagles, and I have been on record even before the AJ Brown trade. I just and you kind of have to throw some things out there, but I think Jalen Hurts is going to, with his improvement. You look at how he improved in college, and the receivers he has around with him now. But yeah, I think he is going to be in the MVP conversation. I think the Eagles are going to be better. It is interesting. I think when you look at the Cowboys, they should be better. And Bodkins was right. They really are a paper tiger within this division. And a lot of that, we talked about this offline, is, Mike McCarthy. And coaching wise, it matters. And, when you look at the Commanders, I mean, as much as I have, they've been through a ton of different coaches. And now that they have, Ron Rivera, he is that stabilizing force. He is, and you really kind of trust him, kind of overall game management and everything, right?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, look, here's the thing. No excuses for Scott Turner either. He has so many weapons on his field now that Scott Turner has no excuse. While as an offensive coordinator, he can call plays that should work for all players. All players. I'm going all the way down to tight ends and running backs, okay? I even like the tight end we took, I think it was out of Nevada, okay? Gives me the Dallas Goedert type of feeling when Carson Wentz had Dallas Goedert in Philly. I can't remember his name from that we took from the draft. Cole Turner, there you go.
Yep.
But it's like that guy is big. He can go up and get the ball in the quarter of the end zone. So if you want to throw fades, there you go. He's another. Put it this way, I think he's a more healthier Jordan Reed and a little bit taller. Jordan Reed was that force, and Eagles fans know it. Jordan Reed was that force, and they hated him because he was that guy that can go through the middle of the field, catch a pass as a tight end, and go for 40, 50 yards. I think, again, I keep saying, I know Philly fans think, you said that Jalen Hurts is going to be in the MVP talk. I wouldn't put him there right now, only because there's other quarterbacks in this league that are going to be there. And yes, I will say he's probably top 10. I'll put him there. I'm not going to say where I would put him in top 10 right now, because I like to kind of actually look at the preseason first to kind of get a gist of what players are going to look like. But I do know I say this. The Eagles and Washington Commanders are going to shock a lot of people in this division.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Rivera, like you said, being a stability coach for that division, for that team, is why they've been able to still be. Because let's be honest, usually Washington will go from winning 6 or 7 back to 3 games. Well, for some way, somehow, they went from being winning 7 to still winning 7. That means that they improved somewhere still, but they were just, they needed a little bit more. Maybe that's the quarterback. Maybe that's the extra wide receiver they just drafted. Maybe that's the extra running back they just drafted, So it's a lot of what this team did. I mean, you're putting the names up right now. If you look at Percy Butler, he was one of the fastest safeties in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of picking here that they did for a lot of things. And it's I think Washington still improved in a lot of areas, even depth-wise, and I think even starting-wise.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked a ton about the offense, but when you look at Washington, I mean, you can't, start a discussion without talking about Chase Young and some of the defensive keys. I mean, talk about him, and some of the other key players this year that they're going to help, Washington hopefully do as good as you think they will.
Right, and I'll say this. I've been saying this on Twitter too. I think here's what a successful Washington is going to be. They made the playoffs and won those 7 games in what was it 2020 because of their defense. Okay, straight up, their defense was that good.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Young and that defense got turnover after turnover, even after giving up a big play. And I think if Chase Young, number one, if Chase Young could come back as healthy as he was in year 1, but with extra moves, and when I say extra moves, he has to have more than just one get up and go move. He's got to have a get up, go, and spin move, a get up, go, and an arm move, something that can help him not be so predictable from offensive lines. Because I think after the first year, he was very predictable. It's the problem. But I think he's got to come back healthy, have extra moves. And from what I'm hearing, he's I think in California or something like that also, working on his moves, working with the coaching staff, working with other players that have been very successful in this league. So I think he's going to come back stronger and better than ever because what happened to him last year was a fluke accident, and it wasn't nobody's fault. It's that terrible field that Washington had that I've heard they're changing. But it's if they get him back and that defense back, and they got the weapons on offense with a quarterback, hang it up. The 10 wins I'm talking about may become 12. Because if their defense is that good, if their defense is as good as we're saying it could be with Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Chase Young, the other defense, and they got Montez Sweat.
Yep.
Because when him and Montez Sweat was on the edge and Jonathan Allen and Payne was right there, they were a force to be reckoned with. I mean, you saw it every game.
And speaking of that, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, they're good, right?
Oh, they're good. They talked it out. This is what they said. 2 players not used to losing. That night was terrible. They come from organizations in college where they were winning. And I told people that when you get 2 players that are used to winning, that's what happens. That's why I said if the defense could be that good and they're that connected, and don't forget, Warren Sapp was at their practice. Warren Sapp was at the practice and told them, y'all need to be a force to be reckoned with. Y'all need to be somebody that's not predictable. Y'all need to be hungry. Come after the quarterback every single play. Don't give up if you give up a 20-yard back. Come after that quarterback and be hungry. And if that D-line is hungry, the cornerbacks don't have to worry about it as much. And then that offense is going to get short fields. And that's why I said if the defense is back, you can forget about the 10 wins I said. It's going to wind up being 12 wins.
Well, and so you look at that defense then, what would the weakness be? Do you think it is the secondary or?
I think it's more so, the cornerbacks. I think who we traded this person away and got him back. He played for Kansas City.
Kendall Fuller,
Kendall Fuller.
Yep.
I think Kendall Fuller was probably the best cornerback we had. I do think that I think his name is, I think the other guy is William, or is it we call him WSG or WSJ. But if Jackson could be even better, I think they said he improved throughout the season. I think it was the camaraderie of the cornerbacks having to come together and understand how they need to play together. I think, unfortunately, I said this before when we signed the I'm having a brain fart right now, but we released him in June, post June release, and got his money back. I think that's why they drafted Percy Butler, because they knew that they were going to need him.
Okay, yeah.
And Cam Carroll, that guy was a steal. I mean, let's not forget he was a 7th round pick. So I think Cam Carroll and Percy Butler are going to be great together. I'm not worried about the secondary as far as them. I'm just worried about, we just need another cornerback. And if Benjamin St-Juste can be that third player in the slot or something, and again, they don't have to be great. If the defensive line is that formidable again, then you don't have to worry. Then the cornerbacks don't have to worry about covering that long. But if we need it, look, Benjamin St-Juste is going to have to step up. Percy Butler, his first year, is going to have to step up, which I have no problem with them doing. I think that, again, if that defense is back to being, I think they were number 2 that year that they made the playoffs. If they're back to that type of status, just like that person said, watch out for Philly, watch out for Washington, because there's going to be a lot of short fields for them in that year, this year, if that happens.
What about that linebacking core? I mean, Jamin Davis. I mean, is that David Mayo or Cole Holcomb? I mean, what are you expecting from that group?
I think Cole Holcomb solidified his spot. Jamin Davis is definitely going to have to step up and play better. He's going to. I think that they have to put him also in a position to be better. I think a lot last year with a lot of these injuries and stuff that was happening, they moved him around. I think they need to put him, in my opinion, as like an outside linebacker, because he's more of a sideline linebacker, and he is fast. He has speed. I mean, we saw that several times last year. I mean, there was times he made plays that you're like, okay, this is the Jamin Davis we need. But then there was times he didn't make plays. You're like, what are you doing, dude? So I think they have to understand that after year 1, okay, we got tape on him. Let's go back and look and see where we can put him to succeed. Because I think that's the biggest thing right now in the NFL is putting players where they succeed at.
Absolutely. And, a lot of that happens during, getting that all worked out in training camp. And, what are some stories that you're watching within training camp? And then also, I mean, is part of that kind of how it'll shake out, like on the offensive line as well?
Well, you know what? I told people this. For some reason, Ron Rivera's been very great at plugging and playing on the offensive line for us to finish top 6 or number 6 in PFF's ranking from last year. For the type of season we had, and especially with that COVID ran, weeks, to finish 6th was pretty darn good for plug and play. Mm-hmm. Sam Cosmi is going to have to step up a little bit, but I think that, for us to plug and play on the offensive line and finish number 6, not worried about that. I think my storylines to watch for training camp is, again, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin now returning and getting in sync with Carson Wentz. I want to see how that works out, especially now that, next month, believe it or not, I'll say this. Next month, we're looking at preseason football, so, that's a good thing. So we'll be able to see in action how things are with Carson Wentz, Terry, and Jahan. I really want to see DeWami Brown take a step up. DeWami Brown, again, was another player last year that was in and out of their lineup with injuries. I want to see what he can do with Carson Wentz. But also, I really want to see Brian Robertson, that running back we drafted from Alabama. I want to see where he's going to place in the team. And Benjamin St-Juste, I need to see is he really going to be able to take that number 3 cornerback spot and solidify that as a slot receiver and allow Jackson and Fuller to do their thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you brought up Brian Robinson, and I believe he sat behind, some great running backs and really kind of, waited his turn for a while. And, some of these, running backs that kind of, come to be great, they're not the number 1 picks, but they're the ones that are, that, work their way in and, solid college careers. And, I do like that pick for Washington, especially, just adding in the whole offense. And you talk about, I mean, if they really get that wide receiver core going, I mean, it could really open the field up, for the running backs, especially with that J.D. McKissick. I mean, he adds a lot to the offense, doesn't he?
Oh, my gosh. He adds so much to the offense that I think if the wide receiver core opens it up for him, then it opens it up also for Antonio Gibson, as I keep talking about. That in college he was that wide receiver running back hybrid. So if they go, oh my gosh, with Terry, Jahan, and Curtis, we got our top 3, and the DeWami as our wide receiver 4 we could throw in the field at times. Here's the thing: now again, you don't have to worry about Antonio Gibson running as the running back too much. You could put Brian Robinson in there, and J.D. McKissic, and now Antonio Gibson becomes your workhorse for the out of the backfield type of people. Or as I said before, and I think this is why I keep saying it, like I want to see them use them in this way. If Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson, or Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic, or even vice versa, Robinson and J.D. McKissic are in the field at the same time, I want to see that quarterback, running back, with the quarterback in the shotgun, and teams not knowing if you're going to Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic. And I want to see J.D. McKissic and Antonio Gibson more so in that format or in that formality, because both are running, have been listed as running backs, but both are also wide receivers. J.D. McKissic is more of a wide receiver, catch a screen pass out of the backfield, or go and run these 5-yard routes, catch it and go 40 yards. Antonio Gibson can do the same thing. And I think if you have both of those in there at the same time, people are so focused on that Terry and Jahan are going to be open and down the field. Both of those are deep threats. We know that.
When you look at this season, as a fan and someone who's covered the team, is this the most excited that you've been at the start of the season, just, with the name change and everything? And as far as like, maybe fans even coming to to see them in person as well?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. This is my most excited because when I saw again that we drafted a wide receiver, I knew Ron Rivera was like, I got to get Scott Turner some weapons. I knew he was like, we need this offense to be able to score 35 points. We need to be able to get the ball down the field, and we can't keep relying too much on Terry McLaurin to be the only guy. So when I saw him do that, and I'm like, okay, now this also gives Curtis Samuels a full off season to get healthy. This also gives Dewami Brown, and then I heard, I'm like, oh, we're getting Carson Wentz. Yeah, okay, rocky thing here and there, but if this guy like balls out, I mean, and people said, if Washington gets the second year Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz, the league is in trouble, because then that means that you're going to have Carson Wentz throwing for 35 touchdowns and less than 10 picks. That means Washington's putting points on the board. Their defense, if that returns, which I think it can, oh my gosh, that's why I keep saying, like, I'm keeping the ceiling at 10. Even with the easy schedule, people say, nah, it's more than 10. I'm like, no. I learned as a Washington fan, especially like Capitals and Nationals, keep the ceiling low when you're in the playoffs, or even if you go to the playoffs. So the regular season, I'm keeping the ceiling low. 10 wins is my max right now. But if he balls out, if we get the Carson Wentz from 2-3 years ago, those 10, as I said, will become 12.
And you talk about the offensive coordinator, and I'm not sure who the quarterback coach is there for the Commanders, but I mean, that'll be interesting to see how they work with Wentz's gifts and just
you're talking about his strengths and weaknesses.
Yes, and put him in the right position, because that's a huge thing. I mean, as a Bears fan, I know that with Justin Fields, the coaching staff, and that's why they're gone. They didn't put him in the best position. I mean, it was horrible what they did in Cleveland to him. But I mean, that's a huge part. I mean, so when you look at that relationship, I mean, are you kind of excited to see how that's going to develop?
Yeah, Carson Wentz said when he came here and he visited and stuff, when he possibly heard he was going to be traded, that he sat down and talked to Ron Rivera. He sat down and he also talked to Scott Turner, and they understood. And he said that what they told him is that we're going to put you in the best position to succeed here. We're going to get you weapons. I think, again, that's why they traded back and still got the guy, Jahan Dotson, because they was like, what we need is a guy that can run routes, that can get open, that has speed, that can get down the field, that can be a deep threat. We know we got Carson Wentz that can throw the ball. So I think that they said, even though people were like, oh, well, you guys passed up on this guy and that guy. Look, they wanted to get Carson Wentz as much weapons as possible, because here's the thing. If he has all these weapons and he still flames out, then it's Carson Wentz. Then that's when you say, Sam Howell, take the wheel. Because now we're just going to let you take the chance and see what you can do with all the weapons.
Mm-hmm. So my guy Silverado Kev here, he's a 49ers guy. He, talked about Wentz having the Jimmy gene, but obviously does say Wentz is better than Jimmy. What are your thoughts on that comparison?
I think that's let me just be respectful. I think a lot of people wanted Jimmy Garoppolo here in Washington, and some people didn't. I was happier with Carson Wentz than Jimmy Garoppolo, only because I feel like there's a little bit more better like play out of Carson Wentz than it is Jimmy Garoppolo. I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is too conservative. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's also like they don't want him to take chances. And I think at times you do have to take a chance as a quarterback. Like, look, how many times have we thrown the ball up to Terry McLaurin in his first 3 or 4 years here, and he won those 50-50 balls more than he lost them? I feel like Jimmy G didn't take those chances, but at the same time, when he did, he was just good and bad, as he said, very bad at sometimes. I don't think Carson Wentz is very bad. I think that, I think that he just makes boneheaded throws, if that makes sense, than being very bad. I think at times he sees an open window and he thinks that he's Aaron Rodgers, and then he throws it, and then he knows by the time it left his hand that was a bad mistake. And again, I don't think he makes those many mistakes doing that, though, because at times when he has those great seasons like last year, 7 interceptions is not a lot. I know people keep telling me, oh, you're just looking at numbers and not looking at anything else. I'm like, well, I get that he had a bad game and didn't take the Colts to the playoffs. But as I said, 27-7 is not a bad ratio. What you're telling me is for 7 interceptions in an 18-game season at that, okay, with 17 games won by the one bye week, you're telling me for every 2 weeks or 3 weeks that goes by, he's throwing 1 interception, is what you're telling me. So I'll take that any given week with these type of weapons. I think with these weapons, you're not even talking about 27 touchdowns. You're talking about 30, 35 touchdowns with the type of weapons. I don't think he had the weapons that he has here in Washington that he had in Indianapolis. I know that they're saying that he had a few guys that were like unknown wide receivers, but he's got a 3rd-round pick that's now playing, that's got paid like a 1st-round pick. You have Jahan Dotson that should perform like a 1st-round pick, right? We're hoping. You got Curtis Samuels that was a 2nd-round pick, I believe, or something like that in Carolina, but played like a 1st-round pick. He's got the weapons more here than he had in Indianapolis. And we agreed. We think that was more the owners that didn't want him.
And he didn't even have that in Philadelphia. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And still threw 35 touchdowns or something like that year. I mean, he was on pace for 40 touchdowns. Carson Wentz made those receivers in Philly at that point what they weren't. He made them what they were, but they weren't that at that point. So, like, that's why I'm trying to tell people, like, I'm keeping the ceiling at 10 because I know it's still Washington. And there's going to be games that we probably lose that we shouldn't. But then I won't be shocked if there's games that we should lose that we win because the quarterback we have that can take us down the field. Like, it just feels different this year. It feels like 10 is just a realistic number to stick with. But if we end up with 12, it's like, okay, wait, we won 12 games this year. And 12 wins can get you a bye week. So who knows? I mean, I know this year that the 2nd seed plays the 1st week, but you never know. The NFC is so bouncy that 12 wins is a number 1 seed almost. I mean, what did Dallas win? 12 games last year?
Yeah.
And I think they won like 12 games. I think they had the bye week, if I'm not mistaken. So
they were the number 2. Packers were number 1.
Okay. So then the Packers, I think, had 13 wins.
Yep.
So it took 13 wins to get to the number 1. But with Devontae Adams gone, who knows what Green Bay is going to do?
I totally agree. Yes. Living here in Wisconsin as a Bears fan, exactly. I hear, you're not going to miss Devontae, but the receiver makes a difference. And especially with how great he was. And it takes time to develop. It took him 3 years to develop, and it's going to take Christian Watson time to develop. We'll see, how that goes. It's interesting. Christian Watson from the same college as Carson Wentz, so NDSU. It takes time, to adjust, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what Washington does this year. I definitely like your thoughts about the receivers. I think that's huge.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know we've hit on it a lot, but I really like the direction of the team. Somebody actually once said this is the best wide receiver core we had since who was here? I think it was Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon. And even that time when we still had the tight end Jordan Reed. I think it honestly is the best wide receiver core we had since then. And I wanted to bring up, I know you guys spoke about like running backs actually coming in later rounds. It's funny you say that because Washington, I don't know the last time they've drafted a running back in the 1st round. Alfred Morris was in the 6th round. Antonio Gibson, I believe, was a 3rd or 4th round pick. And now Brian Robinson in the 3rd. Like you said, people feel like so much you got to take these running backs so high. And and again, I'll go back and say, like I told the Giants about the quarterback, I think they made a mistake taking that running back that high, Saquon.
Mm-hmm.
His first year was great. Second year wasn't so good. Third year, boom. Like, it's running back life in the NFL, their life shelf or their shelf life is very short.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you draft them in the first round, because then that means you're going to overuse them. That's already a known thing. First round running backs are overused. That's why Ezekiel Elliott is not going to be as good as he was, and he's going to his 6th year maybe. Their shelf life is 10 years at the max because they get banged up. But I feel like running backs that are late round picks, their shelf life goes a lot longer.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fun. Where can everyone find you again?
So you can find me on Twitter. My name on Twitter is at @EdwardFord_TV. So you won't be able to miss it. Trust me, when you find it, there's a check mark there, so you'll know it's me. You can find me on Facebook as well. You can just search my name, Edward Ford, on Facebook. I don't use Instagram that much. I do have an Instagram, but I don't use it that much. So if you really want to reach me or have thoughts or anything about sports, or you want me to even join your podcast, this is the 3rd podcast I think I've joined so far this year. So reach out to me on Twitter. We can set up a time. Yes, as we had spoke about earlier offline, there may be some juggling of schedules with me working in news and stuff, and working overnight, and then things happening like breaking news in the morning. We had spoke about the Roe v. Wade thing that happened when I was at work. So that took another hour out of my time from work, or life, should I say. And that was the day I was flying out. So I was able to still get on my plane on time. But yeah, you guys can find me there. We can talk about sports. I do not mind talking about sports. That's the one thing that I love. I wake up every morning for. So, and mine is obviously work, and loving my job, but still sports. So.
Well, absolutely. And it'll be fun. We'll have to connect again as the season gets going, and I'm looking forward to, the season and everything. And I definitely appreciate you coming on.
Oh, no, you're welcome. We could definitely do, like a thing where like you spoke about the over under, but we can go through each team's schedule and put the W's or L's. That's kind of fun to do, because, you kind of thumbtack on your wall or your refrigerator, go back and say, okay, I was wrong here, I was right here, revisit it later on in the podcast when I come back. So we could definitely do that. And we could definitely do fantasy time, once the fantasy drafts and everything is over, hey, should I trade this player, or what's the max value for this player? So
let's do it. Once again, this has been an NFL Outdated Cover 2 series on the Washington Commanders. Thanks again, Edward Ford.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.